All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September Ivy Talk. We are very excited to be hosting this talk. I am Susie Farmer, the Education Director at Ivy Creek Foundation, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you all today. This evening, Rowena Zimmermann will be discussing invasive plants and how to control them. She is the Director of Communication and Outreach for Blue Ridge PRISM. She has a long history of service in the nonprofit world as an executive director, board member, employee, and volunteer. She was also a partner and principal grant writer for Virginia GrantWorks. Prior to her nonprofit experience, she was a senior analyst for JLARC, or Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, the oversight agency for the Virginia General Assembly. She holds a master's degree in public policy with a specialty in regulatory economics from William and Mary, and is a writer, a master naturalist, loves nature and birds and her dog, correct?
Yes, my two dogs.
You're her dog. All right. So we are very excited to have Rowena with us this evening, and I will turn it over to her.
Thanks so much, Susie. I'm so excited to be here today, and it's a pleasure. And once again, my name is Rowena Zimmermann, and I'm the Director of Communications for Blue Ridge PRISM. And today we're just going to talk about invasive plants and their effect on their world and maybe some of the things we can do about it. First of all, who is Blue Ridge PRISM? Blue
Hey,
Ridge PRISM.
Rowena, I'm
Yes.
sorry I interrupted you, but I forgot to do the housekeeping part.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
So,
Let me go backwards.
okay, I'm so sorry.
Oh, no. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
We're
Um,
among friends.
if you all could please mute yourself, that would be great. And this is also being recorded and will be up on our website in about a week, probably. And if you do have questions during the talk, please put those in the chat box and we will get back to you, or we will answer those at the end of the talk. Now, back to Rowena.
Okay. Thanks, Susie. And actually, two more people entered while you were talking. So um, once again, I'm Rowena Zimmermann, and I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach from Blue Ridge PRISM. I'm so pleased to be here today. And today I'm just going to talk a little bit about invasive plants and their effect on our world and some of the things we might be able to do about it. First of all, who is Blue Ridge PRISM? Blue Ridge PRISM is an acronym. It stands for the Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management. At the beginning of its life, it was mostly a cooperative weed management area, which it still is, where everyone is working together, private, public, landowners, and nonprofits to deal with invasive plants on property, because so much of the land in Virginia is owned by private owners. We have grown. We have 5 staff members now and have a lot of different things that we do, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. Where is Blue Ridge PRISM? We cover 12 counties in Virginia, and I'll read them out to you real quick. Our southernmost county is Nelson County, and going north, it's Albemarle, Augusta, Buckingham, Page, Greene, Madison, Rappahannock, Warren, Clark, Fauquier, and Loudoun counties. That encompasses 3.6 million acres in Virginia. Included in that is 200,000 acres in Shenandoah National Park, which is also in our region. The core purpose of Blue Ridge PRISM is to improve the health of our natural world for future generations. Some of the things that we do is we have workshops for the public. This one is taking place at Blandy Experimental Farm, which is at the Virginia State Arboretum. And we are talking about invasive plants here, obviously. And here is Jacob Edel, who is one of our invasive management specialists, who's standing in a bed of stiltgrass just to show how tall it grows. Another picture of just some samples of invasive plants that we like to take to our different workshops. Here is one of our instructors walking around McIntyre Park with people who have signed up for a workshop to try to help them learn how to identify plants, invasive plants on their own landscapes. A really big thing that we do, we have two invasive management specialists, Natalie Walker and Jacob Edel. And in those 12 counties, Natalie is the northern invasive specialist for a region, and Jacob is the southern. And they will actually go to your property and walk it with you and help you identify whatever invasives you've got on there, and then eventually come up with a plan for you, a management plan. So it's a really valuable service that we provide for free. Another thing that we do is we have a large online presence. Coming up on October 16th is our quarterly meeting. This is our fall meeting. And we're really excited to have Linda Fink as our guest speaker. She's going to be talking about insects, invasive ones, native ones, and what's happening to them. There's been a precipitous decline of insects in our world, and invasive plants haven't helped that. So she's going to just talk about how all of this is interconnected, and she is a wonderful speaker. So I hope many of you can come join us. That is an online Zoom webinar, and it is free to the public. So just go to our website and sign up if you're interested. Another thing that we do is we work with the public, different community groups. This is Rod Walker right here. He's the president of Blue Ridge PRISM, and he spent a day with a Girl Scout troop at the Sugar Hollow area to do a garlic mustard pull and walk around the different lands at their camp. And everyone had a great time. We also send out periodic and timely weed alerts to tell you when is the best time to control a specific invasive plant on your property. For example, I would send this garlic mustard weed alert out at the beginning of the spring. You can see that the time here is April 2nd, when it's a good time to manually pull the garlic mustard out of the ground, especially when the soil is wet. And I don't know about you, but my soil is really wet right now because we've had quite a bit of rain the last couple of days, which has been really welcome. We also have a collection of very informative fact sheets of some of the worst invasive plants in Virginia, and you can find those on our website. And the website address is www.blueridgeprism.org. So any questions you've got about Blue Ridge PRISM, you can probably find the answer on the website. Who are our partners? Last December, we convened a really wonderful workshop type of conference here in Charlottesville that brought together almost 80 different nonprofit, state, local, some national groups, and some private groups, to really talk about the problem of invasive plants in Virginia and how we were going to work together collectively to address this issue that keeps growing. As a result, here are all of our partners that are working together, and you'll see you've got some state agencies, you've got some, this is the Smithsonian, Virginia Working Landscapes, you've got botanical gardens, you've got a bunch of different groups, CBLP, and even private entities that want to work together with us, the Nature Conservancy, to figure out a plan going forward that we can all work on together to address invasive plants in Virginia. And with that in mind, we have created something called the Virginia Invasive Plant Coalition. And we even have our own website, virginiainvasives.org. So feel free to go on by there to take a look at what's going on with that. And that will change as time goes on and as we get more organized and have more events. So what are invasive species? I think you've probably heard a lot of these terms: non-native, exotic, alien, non-native, invasive, foreign. It's very confusing. So in in 2016, there was an executive order 13751, which basically stated that invasive species means, with regard to a particular ecosystem, a non-native organism whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human, animal, or plant health. So we kind of use that definition as federally mandated to define how we ourselves define invasive species and how we classify them. So the key for that definition, one of the first ones, is that it was not present in North America prior to initial European contact. So basically, an invasive species is a plant that wasn't around when North America was, kind of untouched by itself, and before outside, the European people came on their ships and maybe brought some plants with them. Those are the native plants that were here before anybody else was here. So an invasive species was not here prior to initial European contact. Number two, invasive species cause harm, and that can be economic, environmental, and harm to human, animal, or plant health. How do they cause harm? There are several ways. Here are a few that are listed. They form a monoculture. They blanket the ground. They crowd out native species. They clog waterways. They strangle and smother native trees. They prevent native seeds from germinating, and they stop forests from regenerating, really kind of threatening our hardwoods, and even more things. An example of economic harm would be this calorie pear. It's so pretty, so popular in the 90s or in early 2000s. Everybody wanted a calorie pear tree in their front yard because it was a sign of spring. But what happens? It became very evident that calorie pear is basically a runaway invasive tree. It spreads precipitously and just takes over huge areas of landscape where nothing else will grow. Nothing else will eat calorie pear. And so you just have all this calorie pear. And another issue with calorie pear, it's got these really big thorns that if this is near a farm, a tractor, it can actually puncture a tractor tire. And the other problem with calorie pear is it's really weak wooded. So bad storm comes along, there's a chance, really good chance that that pear tree in your front yard might kind of just keel over and break because it's got such weak wood and might hit your house or hit a pole or something. So it's just not a good plant to have around. Other examples we've got here, water hyacinth, really pretty, but it can turn into this, another monoculture covering this whole waterway, which now prevents other aquatic things from living in there and, affects recreation. Maybe you wanted to go ride your canoe in there or your kayak or go swimming. You're not really going to be able to do that with all this water hyacinth crowding you out. Here's Japanese wisteria. This is a lovely photo, I will admit. But here's Japanese wisteria trying to intrude and definitely succeeding into a hardwood forest. It's encroaching, and eventually their vines get so large it starts girdling native trees and smothering them, and they die. Chinese wisteria is also a problem. I know here in Charlottesville, we see a lot of this up in the trees, and you think, oh, is it growing on there? Is that like some sort of purple tree with purple flowers? No, these are actual trees, native trees that have this wisteria vine coming up and girdling them, and then they're blooming. So these trees themselves are not blooming, but the vine that is smothering them is blooming, and it's really not good for these trees. Another example of environmental harm. This is Japanese knotweed, which is kind of notorious for being a really, really, really harmful invasive plant. You can see it here clogging up this waterway. It's just everywhere. Nothing else is going to grow there. Just to show you how tall Japanese knotweed gets. Here's, a male person, and this is trying to deal with this Japanese knotweed, which is really overwhelming. It can grow to really big heights. And it also has economic harm. This is a photo of Japanese knotweed actually going through the outside of a house and coming inside to the wall. And here's Japanese knotweed that has broken through some concrete. So it's really strong and really scares a lot of people. I know that in England, if you have Japanese knotweed in your land, on your land somewhere, it is really hard to sell your house. So if that is something that you see on your property or somewhere, take care of it right away. Another thing about being invasive is that it poses harm to human and animal health. An example of that is Japanese barberry. Again, you look at it and you're like, that's a really pretty color. And it's still sold in nurseries, unfortunately. But look what happens. It can spread throughout the forest floor. So all that red is Japanese barberry. And Japanese barberry has patches of it tend to attract higher concentrations of both black-legged ticks and white-footed mice. And they're both vectors for Lyme disease. So they found that, underneath that, there's something about the dense foliage of Japanese barberry that creates a really good microclimate that's moisture that's preferred by ticks. So basically, the Japanese barberry there on your property is a harbinger for ticks. Like it's there's probably some ticks in there. There are probably some mice that have brushed against there or have hidden underneath there, and is really not a great plant to have on your property. And then finally, another plant that is very obviously harmful to human health is this giant hogweed. If you brush up against this invasive plant, it can cause what looks like a rash that looks like you've been burned very, very harshly, and is very, very painful. You do not want to come into contact with giant hogweed. What are some things that are non-invasive? Well, here's a photo of a trumpet creeper. This is a native plant, and it has somewhat of a reputation of being, it can be a little bit aggressive when it likes where it is, and it can grow up a tree or whatever. But even though it spreads quickly, it co-evolved with our native flora and fauna. So this trumpet creeper is not going to be smothering a tree. It's not going to be girdling a tree. They all grew up together, so they figured out how to play together and coexist together. In no way are native plants invasive. So that's something to remember. Native plants are not invasive. And the terms are never used together, because if you're native, then you're not invasive. Another thing that's not invasive, but is actually not native, is dandelion. It's naturalized. All of us have it on our lawn. It's been around forever. But even though you see it, you see other things growing around it too. You just don't see a monoculture of dandelions. You might have a dandelion, you might have some grass, you might have, buttercups, you might have other different things around it, but it's not just a monoculture of dandelion covering the whole patch. And so it's not invasive. Other things that are not invasive are these 3 specimens that are not native. So they came to North America after, Europeans did. So they're not native, but apples, tomatoes, and the common lilac. They're not native, but they're not invasive. They don't meet any of those requirements that you need to be invasive. They're not harming you. They're not spreading so much and so quickly that they're overtaking everything else. So just remember, the most non-native plants are not invasive. So how did these plants get here? I've talked a lot about European settlement, and I'm just going to go into it a little bit more. Before the Jamestown settlement, our continent had around 18,000 species of plants. Okay, native plants. Those 18,000 had spent hundreds and hundreds of years co-evolving with wildlife in their respective ecosystems. So as I said before, they learned how to play together. They learned how to grow up together and exist. So they helped each other out. One ate, one animal ate the other, and then it ended up, getting pollinated or whatever. So they all figured out how to exist together. But since the Jamestown settlement, which brought European settlers, we have introduced to those 18,000 original species, 30,000 plant species into North America. So these 30,000 came in after European settlement. Of those 30,000, around 5,000 of those new, non-native species escaped into the wild. So they came in and they were brought in and somehow they got out into the woods or whatever, and they're out there. Of those 5,000 that escaped into the wild, 900 are invasive, around 900. So we have around 900 invasive plants in the country, around the country, that have been identified as invasive and meet all of those criteria out of those 30,000 that have been brought in. But when we talk about invasive plants, we're talking about just this subset that not only escaped into the wild, but have those invasive characteristics. Some of them were intentionally brought in. So this is a photo of English ivy. And as you know, some of you might have some in your yard. That was brought to the United States as an ornamental plant. You see a lot of it in England. And it looked like it was going to be a really pretty ground cover. But English ivy, escaped into the wild and grew so fast. And now it poses a threat to not only trees, but structures because it can weaken the structure. Some unintentional, an example of an unintentional invasive plant that came to North America is Japanese stiltgrass. It's assumed that Japanese stiltgrass was introduced into the United States when it was used as packing material for Chinese porcelain or Asian porcelain to come into the United States, and came in the boxes surrounding the plates, and some of the seeds got out and spread. Another example that is well known by everybody is kudzu. It was intentionally introduced to North America in the 1870s as an ornamental vine for shade. Well, certainly provides the shade. And then in the 1930s, it was used to control soil erosion. And you can see what's happened. It's gone crazy. So how do invasive plants spread? They're prolific seeders. They have tenacious rhizomes. They have rampant runners that kind of spread along the ground. And they have stealthy fragments. So you could think you dug one up, but if you just left a little bit of a root, then it'll root itself and become a whole nother plant. So they're very, very consistent in being able to really try to outsmart you, and when you're trying to get rid of them. Common vectors that spread invasive plants throughout the area are birds. Birds will eat some of these seeds and then poop them out, when they're flying along, and they'll fall on and then maybe grow into a plant wherever it fell. Wind will blow seeds. Deer will carry them on their coats. Dogs as well. When they take, you walk around and take a hike with your dog. I know on my dogs, sometimes I'll find a bunch of seeds on their coats. They can get caught on shoes, tire treads, be carried along waterways, and run off. That's just some examples. Invasive plants are really opportunistic. I've talked about this, the other two slides. For the most part, nothing really eats them. They'll have like some birds that might eat some of the berries, but nothing really eats the leaves, which is what we want when we want to have biodiversity in our environment, because we want caterpillars eating the leaves, because caterpillars are what feed the birds. So nothing really eats them. They leaf out early. So what that means is in the early spring, when all the native plants are still kind of dormant and still think it's winter, they're not ready to come out yet, the invasive plant is leafing out. So what happens there? It's leafing out and taking up all of the space, turning green, and already creating a shadow for anything underneath it. Kind of gobbled up all that sun that's available. And then later, when all the native trees and bushes and flowers or whatever have dropped their leaves and getting ready for the fall and winter, invasive plants tend to retain their leaves longer. So when you're walking around some land and it's January and you see green, a lot of the time that's an invasive plant that is still around and its leaves are still green. Someone on our Blue Ridge PRISM staff went out around Greene County this spring. So it's very early spring, March 30th, and took a photo of this. This is a forest and it's been invaded. It's oak hickory forest that's been invaded by autumn olive. And as you see, here are the trees. They're not leafed out yet. Nothing else is leafed out yet, except all this autumn olive, which is kind of spread all around. That's all the green that you can see. And then down here is an uninvaded oak hickory forest that I think she found like several miles down the road, and it appears mostly bare. And this is what it's supposed to look like at that time of year. Everything's still dormant. Native plants are still sleeping, basically, and no invasive plants. So that's why it looks bare. Another photo she took was around the same day was of an invaded floodplain. And this here is an infestation of daylily that's all over the place here. And then she said she had to drive quite a ways to find another a healthy floodplain. And here is a floodplain the way it's supposed to look. These are Virginia bluebells, which are an early spring ephemeral and are blooming early in this year, as many ephemerals do. They're the first things to come out in the spring. But if you have something else that's already come up and has crowded them out, then these can't come up. So what plants are invasive in Virginia, and who decides? The Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation is the state agency that decides which plants in Virginia are deemed invasive. They have so far deemed 90 plants invasive in Virginia, categorized them that. Out of those 90 plants, 50 of them are weed species. And what I mean by that is that 50 of them escaped and are out in the woods, and they're out there, but it's not like anybody's buying them or trying to plant them on purpose. But 40 of them are cultivated and are still sold in garden centers or online. So 40 of them are still considered, commercially viable by some people, and a lot of them, and people still want to buy them. So even though they are invasive and have been deemed invasive, they are still for sale in big box stores and other nurseries and can be bought and planted. How can you help? Well, the most basic thing you can do is learn how to identify invasive plants. Know what's around you. So when you're walking around, you can see what's invasive, what's native. And I'm going to give a little shout out to the fact that if you feel like you could use more help in learning how to identify invasive plants, we actually have an online invasive plant workshop coming up on October 22nd, and it will introduce you to invasive plants and teach you how to identify invasive plants in the fall and winter. So you can more feel better about what you're seeing and feel more confident about what you're identifying when you're walking around your yard or your park or public lands. So keep that in mind. You can sign up for this workshop on our website, blueridgeprism.org. Other things you can do is you can inventory the invasive plants that you've identified and then, start removing them if you can on your land. The second part of the invasive plant online workshops is our management and control of invasive plants. So you can sign up for this separately from the identification one or do both of them at the same time. but this is a really great one. Tim Maywald, who's here on this call, will talk about the different ways that you can manually control invasive plants without herbicide, or the different ways that you can address invasive plants using herbicides like cut stump method. And he'll go over all those different ways and the best things to do at this time of year and the best methods for which plant. So I highly recommend that as well. And that will be on Wednesday, October 23rd. And again, you can sign up for that on our website. Other things you can do is you can educate and organize, make friends with your neighbors, get informed together so you kind of prevent the situation where maybe your neighbor's invasive plants are kind of creeping onto your property and that, and causes bad blood or whatever. You don't want to spread it, to help it spread, and everyone talk together. We have a partnership with LIRA, which is the Loud and Invasive Removal Alliance, which is a set of like at least 500 HOAs in Loudoun County, which are working together to try to control invasive plants on their public lands. And I know Fairfax County is creating a similar type of organization. Well, why not more people? And I'm really proud of Charlottesville, which has created CHIP, which is on its way to becoming an organization that's bringing together different groups to address invasive plants on public lands in Charlottesville. So exciting times ahead. So I encourage you to get involved and again, talk to your neighbor and figure out how you can work together. Another thing you can do is stop it at the source. We talked before about how so many of those invasive plants are still for sale. So one thing you can do is just not buy them and not plant them. So when you see them in the store and don't think, oh yeah, it's pretty, I'm just going to put one in. Don't do it. Just do not buy them. Do not plant them. This is a list of many invasive plants that are still for sale in nurseries like, Home Depot, Lowe's, and, maybe the nursery down the street from you. Just say no to them. Do not buy them. Do not plant them. Every once in a while, Virginia Native Plant Society and Blue Ridge PRISM have little activities where you can volunteer to go in and visit a nursery and just kind of write down, do a little survey on what invasive plants they're selling. And that just helps us just collect data. So, if you are get our newsletter or VNPS's newsletter, you'll probably read about those, volunteer for that if that's something that you would like to do. It really helps to get people, have a bunch of eyes as possible out there to let us know how many invasive plants are being sold and where they're being sold. And above all, choose native plants. When you want to plant in your garden or, help with a community project, always choose to plant native plants. I can't stress that enough. Again, I mentioned the Virginia Native Plant Society. They're a great resource for the types of native plants that are available in the state, and also just great tips and where to buy them. And they'll tell you the different sales around the state. For our area here in Charlottesville, Blue Ridge PRISM helped with a publication called Piedmont Native Plants. And that is available from Blue Ridge PRISM as well as from the Virginia Native Plant Society, and tells you about the native plants that are best for the landscape and the soil around you, where you live right now. And there are several different editions of this book. There's one for the Valley, there's one for Southwest Virginia. So for wherever you live, find out which book pertains to your area. For Charlottesville, it would be this one, Piedmont Native Plants. And it's a great resource for you to see the different types of native plants that would work in your soil. And here's a tip. You can buy this boot brush from Play Clean Go. They sell it on their website, or you can actually just go to a Tractor Supply and buy a boot brush, like from the equestrian section. And that will work as well. And that really helps when you go on a hike. You can just use it to kind of, before you get in your car, brush all the seeds or whatever off of your shoes. And that really helps, keep invasive plants contained and not spread to other areas. So, do you have invasives in your yard and you're wondering what to do about it? We recommend that you follow a series of steps when you have invasives in your yard or to assess invasives in your yard. First, learn your landscape. Learn like what type of invasives you've got there, what type of natives you've got. Are you on a hill? Are you near water? And then know what plants you have, as we talked about before. Identify them. Figure out what you have that's invasive, that's running around and maybe threatening your beautiful oak tree. And also, if you can, identify some of the native patches that you've got and that you might want to protect. Know how much you have. So there's a difference between just having one, little seedling that you can pull up or having this huge monoculture of like stilt grass in your lawn or having like a lot of autumn olive in your woods. Know how much you have and write it down. And then know your goals. For example, is the goal for your land to provide food for wildlife? You want the birds to be able to eat. Or is the goal to protect rare native plants that might be present on your property? Or is the goal to protect forest canopy? Perhaps you've got really great hardwoods and oak trees and you want them to survive and you don't want them to be smothered by Asiatic bittersweet. So know what your goals are. And then finally, after that, make a plan. Decide what you're going to address first. And timing is really important with invasive management. There are better times than others to control certain plants so that you're successful. So it's really important to know when to address them and how to do it. And then after that, get to work controlling it. So I have this bracket showing you that Blue Ridge PRISM can help you with most of these things. Because our invasive management specialists that I talked to you about before will come to your property and walk it with you, and they can help you do all of these tasks. And even though we are not going to go to your property and pull weeds for you, we can help you on our website. Actually, we've got a listing of contractors, and we can also help you come up with a plan on how you can do it yourself. So keep that in mind. We will give you a management plan that's really great and really exhaustive after the visit, and probably follow up with you afterwards to see how it's going. One final shout out would be for our in-person. We actually have in-person workshops as well as online workshops, and that's coming up on October 25th. If you live near the Charlottesville area, or even if you don't, come on and join us in McIntyre Park that day. It's going to be a hands-on in-person workshop where we'll do a short plant ID walk, where you can see in the wild what certain invasive species look like. And then you will have the tools there for you to see exactly the kind that you need to use and show you using colored water how to actually use herbicide. So if you would like to just get a much more in-person, hands-on learning experience from us, please feel free to join us on October 25th, and you can find out more about it on our website, blueridgeprism.org. I had a friend who works in the conservation area here in Charlottesville, and she said, yeah, I would love to get a job in conservation, but I just couldn't do what you're doing. I couldn't work with invasive plants all the time because it's just so negative. And I can see that, because once you learn how to identify native plant and invasive plants, you see them everywhere. When you're driving down the road, sometimes you feel like it just kind of hits you like, oh my God, it's overwhelming. And it can be really overwhelming and depressing. But remember what Blue Ridge PRISM's mission is, and that is to preserve our natural resources, our land for future generations. It's really important to us. And so here is an example of Tree of Heaven. Look how tall it is. It's a monoculture. It's an invasive plant. Now, Tree of Heaven is the preferred host plant for spotted lanternfly, which is what you're looking at here. And so here's a photo of spotted lanternfly on grapevine, and kind of eating all this grapevine and kind of sucking the juices out and everything. And there's actually someone there was just an interview that just came out with a supervisor from Loudoun County, and she said she had actually just talked to a vineyard in Loudoun County who said that the spotted lanternfly have definitely had a negative impact on their grape production and at their winery. So what are we trying to save? We're trying to save your wine. We want you to still have great wine in Virginia and great fruit, because spotted lanternfly like to be on any type of fruit vine. So that's, something to focus on. We are really hoping to get people to control spotted lanternfly, as well as, more importantly, at this point, our host plant, Tree of Heaven, so it doesn't affect the economics of vineyards and wineries, and they can still keep producing. Here's a photo of English ivy. And then here's a photo of an English ivy smothering native trees. Look at that, all the way up. This is what we're trying to protect. We want to have our native hardwood trees, our oaks, our willows, our hickories, to be able to live undisturbed, to be able to exist without all of these, vines climbing up them and smothering them. We want them to be healthy for future generations. This is a photo of autumn olive. And this is a photo of an autumn olive infestation. And you can see it's everywhere. Nothing else is there. Autumn olive berries, they have been eaten. Birds do eat them. But what we try to tell people is that they actually contain low amounts of protein and fat, and mostly empty calories. So it's basically like a bird drinking a soda. So if you imagine yourself drinking a soda and then trying to run a marathon, how far do you think you'd get? So thinking about a bird eating these autumn olive berries and then migrating, they're just not going to get as far as they could if they were eating better food. Here is a photo in contrast of a bird eating native American beautyberry, which is a really great source of fat and calories for this bird. This native berry is going to provide much more nourishment for this bird, so she can fly farther, and it's just better for her health. So what are we trying to protect here? We're trying to protect these native plants that so many wildlife depend on to live healthy lives. Here's a picture of lesser celandine. And then here's a picture of lesser celandine that has invaded this whole waterway here, all along here. All the yellow that you see is lesser celandine. And this is one of those plants that I talked about before, that if you just have a tiny bit of root, just a tiny bit that's left in the soil, it'll continue to grow. So this is really an invasive plant to keep your eye out for and try to get as early as possible. What are we trying to say from lesser celandine? Well, lesser celandine is one of those plants that leaves out really early, and before anything else has, early in the spring. What else likes to do that? These spring ephemerals. These are spring ephemerals that come out around the same time, or maybe just a little after lesser celandine, that provide really valuable food for bees and insects that don't have a lot to eat at that time of the year. Nothing else has come out. So some of them have coexisting relationships, such as this minor bee and the spring beauty. They evolve together. And, this spring beauty comes up just in time for this minor bee to come and drink its nectar, and it helps it survive just a little bit longer in the colder weather before other things start coming up. So our ephemerals are really important to our ecosystem. They're there, and they really play a crucial role in helping insects survive. And when you have something like this that's coming up, and taking up all the space that our ephemerals normally would take, that's a really big problem for not just the ephemerals, but for everything that depends on them, like these insects. So we're trying to save them. So to finish, I hope that I've made the point that we can all become better stewards of this land we love in whatever way you want to do it, by education, talking to your neighbor, removing invasive plants, planting native plants. There's so much you can do. And then remember the thing I talked to you about my friend who said I could never, it's just so negative talking about native plants, invasive plants all the time. But again, we realize at Blue Ridge PRISM, I think many of us realize that once the invasive plants are here, so many of them that have become so widespread, you're not going to get rid of all of them. It's impossible to get rid of all of them. What we're trying to do is just limit them and control them enough to give all of these animals and bugs a chance to co-evolve a little longer to learn how to eat them. And so and in order for that to happen, we need to have all of these native plants that are still providing sustenance. These native plants are so important. So we just are trying to buy more time. So to just give everybody more time to co-evolve some more, and that'll take hundreds of years. So we just want to make this place a better place for our children here, so they'll still have these beautiful trees to appreciate and wonder at, and for the birds, so they'll still have something to eat, and for all the insects and caterpillars and bees to survive and not go extinct. Some websites that would be helpful to you if you want to learn more about this are, of course, I've mentioned this several times, the blueridgeprism.org website. And then there's the virginiainvasives.org, which is the SIPSI, the collaborative that we formed. And then there's the VNPS, Virginia Native Plant Society website. And they, as I pointed out here, they have a list of native plant nurseries that you can go to so you can see which stores that you can drive to near you where you can buy native plants. And then plantvirginianatives.org is a program done through DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, that has wonderful information. And this is also a place where you can find information about the different books I told you about for the different areas, like plant native, Northern Piedmont natives, things like that, about the different areas and the best soil for that. So I just want to thank you. It was really a pleasure talking to all of you. I hope what I said was clear. If you have any questions, I am always happy to answer you or talk with you. And you can reach me at rowena@blueridgeprism.org. And once again, so much of the information I've shared is on our website, blueridgeprism.org. So thanks very much. And I really appreciate you spending some time with me tonight. I am going to stop sharing, Susie.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that talk. It looks like we only have one or two questions in the chat. The first one is, when were native plants surveyed after Europeans landed?
I have no idea. Do you know? Before I neglected to tell you that with me on this call, I have Tim Maywalt, who is a tree steward, and as well as he's also an instructor for Blue Ridge PRISM. And I also have Jacob Edel, who is one of our invasive management specialists, and he is the invasive management specialist for our southern region. So if you live in Charlottesville, he is the one who would actually come out and look at your property.
Howdy, everyone.
Hi. So I'm not sure any of us can answer that question about when they were surveyed. I know that
I can actually.
Oh,
I've
great.
looked a little into
Thank
this.
you,
So
Jacob.
yeah, no worries. So invasive plants have been around for quite a while, and you're asking for a catalog. People for a while actually brought over certain invasives on purpose. The most famous one is the Spanish bringing over pigs. Not exactly a plant, but they did bring that over purposely to terraform. And as we said earlier, with dandelions, that's a medicinal plant. It's in a lot of cough drops and throat remedies. So a lot of plants have been brought over historically, but never in significant amounts for it to really become an invasive problem. That happened with the onset of World War I, as we started really trading around the world a lot more. I believe the first notarization of invasive plants specifically came in the 40s or 50s, a decade or two after the kudzu implementation for soil stability and Australia's famous cane toad incident. That's when people really started paying attention to what we're bringing where in massive amounts.
Okay.
Another question was about your all's workshop and if it was going to be recorded, and that's already been answered. So we're going to go on to the next question, which is kind of a question. They would like to know the action for stilt grass in the yard. So I guess they're asking, what do you all recommend to get rid of stilt grass?
I'm going to let Tim answer that. I'm not sure about, it might be a little too late to do what we recommend at the end of, in September, but I'm going to let Tim answer that right now.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways to try to deal with stilt grass, and what we try to emphasize is a timing issue. We try to get it using various techniques that I'll go into in a moment in late July or early August before it flowers and then goes to seed. If we can keep it from going to seed in a given season, it won't be adding new seeds to the seed bed. And if we do that every year for about 5 years, you can control it. I'm in the 4th year of controlling stilt grass in one particular area, and there's a lot less now than there was when I started out. You can cut it or mow it early in the season, every week, but it simply learns to start producing seed lower on the stems if you do that. So again, the easiest way to do it is to hit it once by either using a string trimmer. If there's not much, you can hand pull it. It's easy to hand pull. If you're an herbicide user and you're dealing with very large quantities of it, because it can cover acres, you would typically use a foliar application. You'd spray the plant itself. And it's very easy to kill with a very, very low concentration of herbicide. You hardly use any. It's 0.5% concentration of herbicide. So very little herbicide is going into the ecosystem. And it's a very effective way to keep it from going to seed in a given year, but you have to keep that up for a few years.
Thank you. If anyone else has any other questions, they're welcome to unmute themselves and just go ahead and ask the question.
And I just wanted to go ahead and confirm that all of the workshops that I talked about that are online are going to be recorded. So even if you can't come, I'll be sending you a recording with, and with some additional fact sheets and resources that you can use. So don't let that deter you.
Hey, Rowena, I just noticed that the question about stilt grass had to do with it in your yard. So I assume that means it's mixed in with either your lawn grass or your other native plants, and you're probably not going to be using an herbicide in those situations where it's mixed in with other stuff. Although if mainly what's around, growing around it is not grass, that is broadleaf plants, there are herbicides available that will only kill grasses. So you have some flexibility there based on what it is that you have on the ground.
Yeah, it's basically under the trees with leaves all around. It's not, I don't even do grass. I mean, I'm trying to get rid of grass.
Yeah, in my other life, I'm a tree steward, and they don't allow tree stewards to have lawns.
Can I
Yeah,
ask about
yeah.
Japanese lepidasia? The best way to treat Japanese lepidasia? I know there's different types of lepidasia, but the Chinese one that seems to be the problem. Any thoughts?
The easiest way to treat Lespedeza being a soft body plant is glyphosate, just very targeted. If you're worried about overspray, you can wear I always think of them as like dishwashing gloves, massive, almost to the elbow triple M gloves that are chemical resistant. Just get a good amount of herbicide on your palm and grab at the base and kind of run your hand up and down it. I think we call that the glove of death at our little classes, and that's a way you can just get the glyphosate right onto the plant specifically without foliar broadcast spraying.
Any time of year?
When it's green and active, when it's starting to dry out at the end of its seeding season, which I cannot for the life of me remember right now, it is either dying off or retreating its nutrients into its roots, which it may not take in quite well.
So he's saying when the plant's leaves are still green, but when they are starting to shrivel down, like with most plants, and all the resources are starting to go back down into the ground, into the roots, that is not a good time to treat with herbicide.
Now is a good time because it's going to be going to seed soon.
Now's also a good time to treat tree of heaven, correct?
Yes. Yes, we just sent out a weed alert. It's a good time. It's a final reminder before the leaves start changing. Because when the leaves start changing, real fall color, that means that all the trees are getting ready for winter and all their roots and their sugars are going down into the ground, and that is not a good time to treat with herbicide. But there's a increasing, more and more talk really about the spotted lanternfly and how everybody's starting to see it in our area, which was just frightening because it was kind of nice when you didn't know it was here, right? When it wasn't here, when you just kind of heard about it being somewhere else, but now people are seeing it in their backyard here in Charlottesville. So the problem has come to us.
Okay, well, do we have any more questions? All right, well,
Sorry, I was just going to say thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rowena, for doing this talk for us this evening. Thank you, everyone that attended. We hope you enjoyed it. At Ivy Creek Natural Area and Historic Riverview Farm, if you have never visited our site, please come out and check it out. We are a 200-acre nature preserve and an African American historic site. And a great day to come would be October 19th because we will be celebrating Farm Day from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. This is a free event and it is a fun way to celebrate the history and future of farming in our area. And we will have many different folks set up tabling. We will have family-friendly activities, exhibitors, demonstrations, and community partners sharing information. We hope you will join us and connect with those organizations focused on farming, food justice, and the history of farming. Otherwise, thank you all and have a great rest of your evening and stay dry.
Thanks so much, Susie. It was a pleasure.
Thanks.
Bye.